to Justice Quest.
Hello, everybody. Just a little bit of introduction. My name is Tom O'Neill, and as promised, for the last 2 weeks, I've been advertising. JusticeQuest.com is going to be going live. And here's what we got. First, I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about myself. First of all, I'm an ordained minister, and I go ahead and preach every Sunday and minister to those who need help in my congregation. So what I've noticed, I'm also a deep biblical scholar. And what I've noticed is that what we got today going on in the world is not what God intended. I'm 65 years old. I went ahead and I grew up on a small farm in Pennsylvania. I left for the military when I was about 18 years old and joined the Air Force, where I became a avionics communications technician. So served 20 years in the military, got out, and been kind of floating around a little bit ever since then. So went from job to job, here and there. And you'll hear more about that as we go on. But let me go ahead and point out to you right up here, Psalm 89:14, righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. And that is what is going to be the focus of this program, is justice. There seems to be so little of it today. And we are kind of strangling here and struggling with how we reconcile being a Christian with the lack of justice going on. I mean, God's word is clear. The righteous rejoice when a good man is in power. Yeah, well, that's about it. But and another thing is, I went ahead and I put something up on my whiteboard, and you should pay attention to this every broadcast. When I refer to they or them, New World Order, Illuminati, these are the lists of the names that we're going to be talking about. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, DuPonts, the Kochs, the Waltons, the Al-Sads, and there's a guy in China called Li. He goes in and he controls China. So anyway, that's the families that are controlling the world right now. And this is setting us up for the book of Revelation. So anyway, over the last year, I've heard a lot about this, and I inquired the Lord, well, what do I do with it? So this is where he's kind of led me. But over the year, I've heard, hey, Tom, the world is ending. Yep. Hey, Tom, lawlessness abounds. Yep. Hey, Tom, we can't find, we can only find crooked politicians. Yep. Hey, Tom, our legal system is crooked. Yep. Hey, Tom, the police are crooked. Yep. Hey, Tom, our taxes are too high. Yep, they are. And the list goes on. You can apply it to climate change. We're running out of oil. We're running out of everything, and water is going to be the next big thing on the hit list. And yet they go ahead and they keep on building these data centers. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just say one thing, that the United States government is out to destroy its citizens. I said that. All right. First of all, we got inflation. When we set up, our country was first set up, gold and silver was the only legal tender. All right. The Rothschilds were the ones that controlled banking in Europe. All right. They were already firmly entrenched. And what happened is they had a central bank. So whenever they went to war, all the countries borrowed from the Rothschilds. So in essence, these countries owed money to the Rothschilds, who found out it was better to loan money to countries than it was to individuals. So that's how it came about. But anyway, when we formed this country, we wanted to get away from that system. So we made gold and silver our legal currency. And for 100 and some odd years, it was that way. In fact, the Rothschilds wanted to go ahead and start a central bank here in the United States. And I can't prove this, but I'm just going to say that was the reason. It come across my desk recently that that's the reason that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. So, because he refused to go along with it. But anyway, along comes Woodrow Wilson in 1913, passes the Federal Reserve Act. Okay, and ever since then, we've been getting further and further away from the gold and silver standard. We become under the central banks. So that's one way we're doing inflation. And back in the 80s, when I was a young man in the Air Force, I noticed that inflation would be like 6 or 7%, and yet my pay raise would only be like 2 or 3%. So I'd lose like 4% all over just in that year alone. And you go ahead and you carry that out 10 years, that's 40%. That could be quite a chunk of change there. So you're losing money. Your money is losing value every year. But we don't talk about that. Nobody ever addresses it. When we go ahead and talk about going back into the gold and silver currency, like John F. Kennedy wanted to do, and he was shot. So that come across my desk recently also. And then we have Ruby Ridge, and if you look at the basics of the case, the ATF talked him into sawing off a shotgun too short, and then they arrested him for sawing it off, and they encouraged him to do that. Meanwhile, they shot his wife, they shot his son, they shot his dog. And that's when I realized that, our government's getting out of control. And that's where we're at now, We had Waco, yeah. Again, weapons violations. The FBI got involved. They burned the compound down. I forget how many were killed. Children were killed, men and women. And then in a weird quirk of thing, they bulldozed the site over the next day before the fire had even gone out. Now, isn't that strange? Isn't that strange? And then the Oklahoma City bombing. Maybe that was set up by the government. Maybe it wasn't. I'm not quite sure about that one. But it all started with the Federal Reserve Act with Wilson, who, when the Federal Reserve Act was passed, it was just before Christmas break. Most of the senators had gone home, and they voted on it at midnight when they didn't even have a quorum, and it passed. Now, if I was the Senate, I'd come back there and say, you know what, we're going to revote this, we're going to vote it down. But they didn't do it. They kept it in place, So you have to understand where our senators and congressmen are at. They work for the world government. These people. Now, several United States codes are codified, that, and I'm going to mention these throughout this broadcast. 5 USC 3331, if you violate your oath of office, you're gone. You can be up to including death. You could be taken out and hung. 5 USC 7311. If you advocate the overthrow of the United States government, you can be hung. Ilhan Omar is a good one. Let's get rid of her under that. 18 USC 241, 242. Deprivation of rights under color of law. All right. We're going to be covering the Second Amendment on Wednesday, and we're going to be going in depth about this. We have this, it's in our Constitution that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. Which part of shall not be infringed upon is unclear. I don't find that unclear at all. And Article 6, Section 2 also states that the Constitution's highest law of the land supersedes all state and local codes. So if your city or state has a permit system, or is you can go ahead and take them to court. You know what? I've got a more radical solution than that. You know, so but we're here saying the United States government is out to destroy its citizens. All right. Recently, Bill Gates come out and is talking about population control. Now, he said it, and I watched the words come right out of the horse's ass itself. And by the way, my language might get a little coarse here, but you know what? I'm tired of being polite. I'm tired of being patient. I am tired of our rights and being trampled upon just by being born here. All right. We have a constitution. That constitution doesn't grant rights to its citizens. It places limits on our government, what they can and cannot do. And Bill Gates has recently come out there, and I saw him just this morning stating that we can reduce the planet's population by 15 to 20% through vaccines, women's reproductive care, et cetera, et cetera. You know, that doesn't sound like he's got America's best interest in mind. And there's many more others. But the fact of the matter is, what we're going to get down to is that this is what happens when we go ahead and get God out of our society. When we go ahead and say, oh, I don't need church, I don't need God, blah, 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 I'm doing pretty well on my own. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Satan's leaving you alone because he knows he's already got you, you know. But we're going to be going ahead and concentrating on this right up here. Justice and righteousness, all right? If God wanted us to live in a righteous world, all right? That's why he gave us the Bible. That's why he went ahead and gave us all the rules to live by. If we all live by those rules, it would be a lot better place. Thou shalt not commit murder. You know, that's a big one. We should go ahead and put that up in Chicago, you know, the murder capital of the world. Also Los Angeles and whatnot, but we're going to be covering that on Wednesday. You know, if we go ahead and reduce the cities where gun control is the law of the land, you know, and murder rates are sky high, we take those off the list. You know, the United States is 193 in the world in as far as murders go. You know, but if we get rid of New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, a few others, then it would be doing it. And Trump is doing his best to clean up Washington, D.C., and everybody's fighting him along the way. And why is everybody fighting Trump? All right, I've got my hat over there on the table, you know, and it's Trump. You know, and recently one woman in my town went ahead and told me to take that hat off. I said, I will not. And I kind of told her what to go do with herself. And I said, he's the only president we've had that's actually been fighting for the American people. The American people. For the last 40 years, you know, every administration talked about doing something with Iran, yet nobody's ever done. Trump said, okay, my turn, I'm going to do it. Oh, you think I get wound up now? You ought to listen to my sermons on Sunday. Ooh, man. When we go ahead and ignore God's word, chaos follows. When God brought this country into being, it was founded under godly principles, and Satan's been working at it ever since to go ahead and destroy it. Let me fish out a dollar bill here. On the back of the dollar bill, there's a pyramid with the all-seeing eyes. You know, and this is where it started. Novus Ordo Seclorum, New World Order. That's Latin. So the New World Order does exist. They've gone ahead and said it right there on our dollar bill, which, by the way, is counterfeit because it's supposed to be gold and silver. And frankly, I would rather have gold and silver. A gallon of gas might cost 3 cents, you know, rather than $3.40 it does today. We would have stable prices. When God said that I will make, if you follow my word, I will go ahead and make sure that gold and silver flow in your streets. So it was gold and silver, not paper money. This is going to be a short one today. I might go another 5 minutes, but when we go ahead and get into the meat of it, it's not only the United States government, but it's the world government that goes ahead and wants to go ahead and destroy its citizens. You know, you've heard the World Economic Forum lady, I forget what her name is, but, you know, she recently came out with something this winter that said something about, you're going to own nothing and you will like it. Whoa, what does that mean? Well, you know what? They're already talking about rent control, price controls, giving you a stable. This is what the digital currency is all about. And several countries have already gone ahead and instituted a digital currency, Vietnam being one of them. But they're talking about they're going to give you just enough to live on. You will have to pay rent for your washer, dryer, rent for your apartment, rent for your toaster, you know, all this. This is what they're talking about. They're going to give you with the right hand and take with the left, you know, and that's just it. There's going to be no more, you know, work for your own wages and pay your own way, all right? People are clamoring for communism, socialism. Well, you know what? Communism has destroyed more people and killed more people off than religion ever has. All right, religion's only, and that's mainly the Muslims. They've gone ahead and their murder rate's only about 3%, but communism takes up the other 97%. And guess what? If you speak out against our government, yeah, you're going to be like just like Ruby Ridge or Waco. You know, one thing about Waco that after they bulldozed it over, the sheriff come up, the local sheriff come up from Waco, Texas, and he was doing an interview. He said that the guy that was running the Branch Davidians, David Koresh, he went ahead and he come to him with a question on a weapon and whether it was legal or not, and it was. Now, if a guy would go ahead and question a sheriff on whether a weapon was legalized, do you think he would have a whole bunch of illegal weapons? I mean, doesn't anybody think? You know, we go ahead and I wrote this book, Two Masters, you know, over 15 years ago. And we go ahead and I covered a number of subjects. And it would just amaze me that the number of people that call themselves Christians, but they glom on to the satanic beliefs. Like, did you know that gun control, God is not in favor of gun control? And I'll prove that on Wednesday. You know, God is not in favor of the welfare system. God is not in favor of homosexuality. But yet the world all wants us to glom onto this, and you've got homosexual preachers out there now. You've got preachers preaching socialism, if not outright communism. You know, enough to make your blood boil. And this is part of God's prophecy that people will come in my name and not be of me. I never knew them. So with that, we go ahead and we can point the system our finger in any which way, and it's going to come out dirty, But the one thing that I do have is we've got this justice system that's supposedly the best in the world. Yet we can't get justice. If the FBI can't do their job and arrest people that violate their oath of office, all right, what are we paying the FBI for? I called my senator and went ahead and I told him, I said, who controls the purse strings? We do. And he said, fine. Well, how about you going ahead and chopping off 50% of the FBI's budget until they start doing their job? And while we're at it, Department of Justice. We've got a con man running around my area around here, and he's talking people into dropping blacktop on driveways. Yet my phone calls to the local law enforcement are met with deaf ears. They tell me it's a civil matter, and I put in a complaint to the Attorney General of North Dakota, and we'll see how it is, how it turns out. But I just read a book this weekend that is unbelievable. Since the 1970s, 60s, and 70s, the legal system in this state is just as corrupt as anywhere else. And I stayed here because I thought it was a peaceful state. But it's not. The number one unwritten law in North Dakota is if you want justice, don't hire a lawyer, because they're going to do what the judges tell them to do. And if you do cite common law, that's not going to work for you either. So that's why when it comes down to it, I'm not trusting anybody. I can't anymore. I was brought up in a time in the 60s where we could leave our cars unlocked and our front doors unlocked and walk away with not a care in the world, because we knew that if somebody broke in, law enforcement would do everything they could to go ahead and find out who did it. It's not that way anymore. Literally, what law enforcement is there is to pass out parking tickets and catch somebody who has a warrant out against them, So literally, if they pass right in front of them, they're not going to do anything about it. When we go ahead and pay our taxes, we expect we expect something. I'm a big fan of the movie series The Chosen, and I'm not anti-tax by any means. Don't get me wrong. All right, we have to have a road system. We have to have a military. We have to we have to have certain things that do the general public good. And I'm all in favor of that. But I don't think that when we pay income taxes, property taxes, state tax, sales tax, bed tax, road tax, this, that, gas tax, there's so many taxes going around here. And what are we feeding? Are we just feeding the bureaucratic machine? No. We're going to get into taxes here in North Dakota. They've got a property tax, sales tax, income tax, And when I first bought my property, I was paying $139, all right? Now I'm paying well over $600. Now that far outpaces inflation by a hoop and a group. But I had to go ahead and have some dealings with the government this way, and I told the lady on the phone that, I see the corruption going on over Minnesota, and I'm wondering how clean is North Dakota? Well, we would never allow something like that to happen. Well, yet I read in the news that a Bismarck man he was a Somali, and he was getting Somalis to their appointments, never had a passenger, but was charging the government for it. you know? So yeah, it exists here in North Dakota too. And I told her, I said, if you think that there's no corruption going on, I says, you must think we're pretty naive out here. Yeah, and they do. So my solution to the tax system is income tax, property tax, sales tax. Get rid of the income tax, pick one. You know what? You get rid of the income tax, we don't have to worry about filing income taxes every year, which that's another story, but I just read a ruling on the income tax here not too long ago. But we could go on and on and on. And frankly, I'm getting fed up because what I'm seeing in the real world is not what I'm seeing in the Bible. What I see going on in the real world is not what I'm seeing is enumerated in the Constitution. I'm going to bring in, and one of my episodes is going to be on the Constitution and how it's being violated. I went through with a highlighter. I said it's being violated all over the place. These people need to go. These people need to be held accountable. I mean, the mess that's going on in Virginia right now. I mean, they come out and they you know what? No, that those people need to be arrested. Those people need to be strung up, and I mean hung. And for those of you who don't go ahead and understand what I mean, H-U-N-G. Take them out to the gallows, string them up. All stations, all channels, 6 p.m. This is to serve an example for the next group of crooked politicians. We'll be getting into the death penalty in the Bible and what the Bible has to say about it in a future broadcast. But right now, I'm kind of going on half an hour, and I was going to keep this short. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. And this is the way it is on 1st of June, 2026. Thank you very much. And we will see you on Wednesday at 11 a.m. at justicequestlive.com.